Hi, I'm Darlene Carman.
And I'm Doug Carman.
And welcome to the show. Terry Geyer's award-winning paintings and sculpture are found in international, corporate, and public collections. He is a popular guest at the studio. You can watch previous shows about his landscapes and portraits from his website. For today's show, we will pick up where his last appearance ended, with the completion of his historical portrait series of inventors for the Silicon Valley Luminary Society. Hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Darlene. Doug?
Yeah, hey Terry, please tell us about the Silicon Valley Luminary Society and how they selected you to do this project.
The Silicon Valley Luminary Society is a private group that was started by a retired patent attorney. And he had originally seen paintings that are now in the National Portrait Gallery, which were done in the 19th century, where one of the wealthy people of the time had hired an artist to travel throughout the country and to record the likenesses of all the living inventors at the time. And this painting was then donated to the National Collection. And he thought, well, you know, we have so many inventors in Silicon Valley, and being a patent attorney, he'd met many of them himself, and he thought that they should be honored similarly, and excuse me, and so he first hired Robert Siemens to do the first painting for him, which was 15 of the inventors pre-World War II.
15 in one painting?
In one painting. It's
wow.
It's quite a huge piece. As a matter of fact, it's 9 feet by 18 feet.
Wow.
And has a Stanford buildings in the background. And it shows the inventors and their inventions. This took Robert Siemens 4 years to do, the one painting.
Wow.
And the idea was to create these paintings and then establish a Silicon Valley history museum and put the paintings in them along with the artifacts of their inventions. And the president of the group is Harold Hobach, and he wanted to establish this. He felt that the inventors were all getting very old, and a lot of them that Siemens did, matter of fact, most of them had passed away, but there were still several of them that were quite old but still living, where we could actually interview them and you know, try to secure the inventions. You know, where in a lot of cases the inventions were really very hard to come by. We had to work with whatever we could find photos to show those pictures. Well, Mr. Siemens, this started, and then there was the first internet bust, and so he put a pause in at that time. It made it very difficult to raise funds for this kind of a venture. And he started it up several years later, and Siemens couldn't do it. His health wasn't good, and he had gotten older.
He's only got ill then, so it made it, you know, because that sounds like a huge project, taking 3 years. And
right.
Yeah, it was a huge painting, and so Harold had looked for someone else to take this place, and he talked to John Ansley, who had done the supports for the first painting. He'd done supports for Stanford University and for the museums and for professional artists all over the world. And he asked him to find some portrait painters that he could work with.
And your name came up, right?
Well, actually it didn't come up because he didn't know me at the time. He had come down to, I had asked him to do a stretcher for me because I was now working on a family portrait which was 6 feet by 4 feet. And that was larger than I wanted to stretch a linen. And I had heard about John Ansley and his reputation, and so I called him and had him make that for me. And when he was delivering it to the studio, which my studio is in Menlo Park, I showed him my portrait brochure, and I said, well, this is what I'll be using you for whenever I have to stretch a large canvas for painting. I will probably have you do it. And he said, oh, you're a portrait artist. He said, I'm just going to see the Silicon Valley Luminary Society. They've lost their portrait artist, and they asked me for some recommendations. And gave him the brochure. I said, well, show it to him, you know.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, wow.
and apparently, you know, all the few people that he had to show Harold were all up in Sonoma County, where Ansel
Out of the area
does his business.
then, yeah.
And but Harold Hobach lives in Atherton, and so we were about 3 minutes away from me. Well, he actually called me that afternoon and wanted me to come out and see the original painting, and so I met him that day, that afternoon, over by his building on Sheraton Avenue, and I looked at the painting and we talked about it, and apparently the price I gave him was pretty much the same as Ansley had done, and we got along pretty well.
You got the job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I understand that you were not part of the inclusion process, but can you give us some idea on what the touchstones were, how they were tallied, so an inventor would be included into the painting? How did that happen?
Yeah, Harold had done some research, and he did know several of these people, and he had looked into to see what their standings were in these different fields, and he did do some outreach to come up with names. And he had been, in between the time of doing the first painting, which they were all established inventors that everybody knew, and these, he had a lot of time to gather material. So he pretty much had made up his mind who to
Who
put
was
in.
going to go into
Yeah.
these portraits
Yeah.
and how they would be gathered? Did he give that to you, or was that up to you to decide who went in which portraits?
No, he had them isolated for the most part by industry.
Right,
We had
right.
had
That's
like
what I
semiconductor
Right.
industry, the computers. We did have one that was a little wider branch, was the post-World War II inventors, but that ended up to be pretty much people that were around the nuclear magnetic energy field.
Yeah.
So.
Well, in your paintings that you like to do, you like to put your subjects in their natural environment, either indoors or outdoors, right? And
Yeah, he had come to the conclusion that, you know, less inventors per painting were probably a good idea.
Yeah.
And I agreed with him. One thing is that when you had 15 inventors and their equipment and their inventions, especially the early inventors, these pieces were big. There was a perspective problem. Because you had these huge buildings for Stanford University in the background, and the focus for each individual group, and over 18 feet wide, there was some really
So you did find it kind of a
problems.
challenge to try to group these people, even though they were in the same industry, to get their contribution into the painting and all, so it kind of worked. So that must have been a challenge.
Yeah, Siemens had a real struggle with getting that to work, and it was a little easier to do with. We just had 5 inventors per painting with the inventions.
Oh, but I could see how it would be a hard problem to really narrow down the inventors, because there was so many of them to choose from. But, you know, one more question before we get to seeing some of these. The research that you had to do, I mean, that must have been grueling, trying to get the likeness, number one, and then the props, the wardrobe, all that. Must have been awful.
Very challenging, because he wanted to show the inventors at the age they were when they made their inventions and their inventions. And the idea behind that was he's trying to encourage young people to work on creating new things.
Sure.
And he wanted to show that these people were quite young when they came up with their ideas. So it was very important to show them at that age.
So
So one of the problems is that when they first made their first inventions, nobody ever heard of them before, and so they have very little photographs of them. And you know, only once they're famous, you know, they're photographed a lot. But and a lot of these go back to, you know, 50s, 60s, where photographs were only taken for like newspaper illustration, which would be just black and white. So I had to interpret black and white photos almost always, and
Wow.
we had to make an environment that they could all be naturally in. So I had to invent
And
an
the
environment.
wardrobe.
And the wardrobe, I have dozens of old Life magazines, so I can see what kind of clothes it was at the time, because we had a very hard time finding pictures of the inventors actually wearing, you know, the clothes that they'd be wearing.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah, we have some of the background that you had to go through, and some of the pictures, and some of the and we want to see the portraits. So, as we take a look at the portraits, which we're going to get to do, can you you can fill us in on what we're going to see? Could we have those the background pictures for the? There we go. This is the beginning process.
yeah, this was Gordon Moore's home in San Mateo County. He lives in one of the 19th century homes that are in the open space area in San Mateo, and they were removing the roof and restoring it at the time. And the slate roof, they have to take them off one at a time and number them so they can put them all back in the same place. Gordon was the first one we met. I was able to secure an email from someone I knew, and I emailed Gordon, and he said, sure, come on by. So we kind of went from there, you know. It's like, could we see you when we're going to do these paintings about inventors? We'd like to see you. Gordon's asked us, you know, we've already interviewed Gordon, and then once we had a few different inventors, it made us sound more reasonable, you know, for what we were doing. But it was very interesting. Yeah.
Next.
Next. Okay. This is Ted Hoff. Harold had met Ted Hoff at some meeting someplace, and had asked him if he could see him at some time, and so that was easy to get in to see Ted. And he was in Portola Valley, beautiful home.
Okay.
To the next, and Steve Wozniak. Well, Harold had thought that it would be Steve Jobs that we should be seeing, and I said no. I said you wanted inventors. The inventor was Steve Wozniak.
Yeah, he would be the obvious. Yeah, he's gotten a lot larger than when
he got
first
larger.
invented.
Well, we used earlier photos of him, and I slimmed him down substantially.
So you made him as a younger man.
Yeah,
right.
and he wanted to be shown. We had met him for lunch, and I shot some pictures of him, and then but he wanted to be shown hand wiring a computer board, because he did that with the Apple I, and so I asked him, well, could we come and see you? And he said, oh, sure, you can come down to the house. And so he had an old Apple I board. He had this beautiful hand wiring. The wires are just taut and they're perfect. And
Wow.
you know,
Real craftsman.
yeah, he's a real craftsman. And he did this on his desk that was like this plywood desk that he's probably, you know, had since 1970. And, you know, his two dogs were at under the desk and at his feet. And, it was great. He had all the original tools that he first did the Apple I with.
Let's see the next one. Where we're going.
Carl Gerasi, the inventor of the birth control pill. He's on the top of a hill in Russian Hill, a whole floor.
Okay.
Beautiful place. Next. This is Rodney. Oh, hold on a second. Rodney Perkins.
Okay.
I said, no, we got very friendly, and I can't remember his name. Rodney Perkins, he did laser scope, which was laser surgery on the ear. And
okay.
So he worked with the early inventors of the laser to come up with that. And they're in my studio. So that's one of the paintings. That's the semiconductor painting in the background.
This interview was done in your studio.
Yeah, we had several of them come to the studio. And that's to show that each one of the inventor portraits was 6 feet by 9 feet.
Okay.
Okay, next. Okay, this was the painting that Siemens did. As you see, it's just huge. That's in the Sheraton Avenue building.
So that has Stanford behind as the background.
They set that all up in on Stanford grounds, with stand-in people. And
That's beautiful. It's really nice.
yeah,
Rich.
he did a beautiful
Yeah,
job.
very nice.
Next. And then these are mine. This is the post-World War II inventors.
And you put them in there actually into their laboratories and working environment, and the best you could.
Yeah, in this one I made it look like a kind of a KQED demonstration. So it's like a television studio.
Okay.
And all the equipment's period. There's a Klystron.
Any
there with
names here
Varian.
that stand out to you?
There's Russell Varian in the front, W.W. Hansen on the far left, who was the inventor of the nuclear, the linear accelerator. We've got, hold on a second, I got to refer to the notes here.
I wouldn't be able to know them all.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah, this gets, okay.
You can see
We've got
what the
Felix
challenge
Bloch in the
was with
center.
the variety of stuff that they invented.
Yeah.
And he's invented basically the basis of the MRI now. He basically made nuclear magnetic resonance a reality.
Okay.
Charles Ginsberg for the first videotape recorder. It's a 2-inch videotape recorder. And on his, the last person is Ray Dolby. We all know him for sound. But when he was in high school, he actually worked on the VTR machine under Charlie Ginsberg. So he did both.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And the next painting? Let's see, what's the next one?
Those are scientists. I like to think of them as physicists, most of them, but they cross over a little bit.
Nice background.
Yeah,
I like that.
That's actually the fireball from the hydrogen bomb in the background. This is a test bomb. It wasn't the one that we all know of. And that was from the front cover of a Life magazine from the 40s.
Wow.
I got an original when that was just the
That's
coolest
what you got?
thing, you know, before it got its bad rap. But we've got Seeberg, then Robert Oppenheimer, Edward Teller. Oppenheimer and Teller both worked
Yeah, he
at
was
UC Berkeley.
in this area.
Yeah. Charles Towns, I did meet Charles Towns. He was 96 when I met him. And Arthur Shallow, which was his brother-in-law. And together they developed the Ruby laser, the first laser device. In the background is a targeting laser from Lawrence Livermore Labs on the right-hand side.
What was your average time to complete one of these paintings?
They went from 6 to 9 months. I figured
Each one?
Yeah, for each one.
Wow.
And it was about, I think I figured out it was about 7.5 months average. But a lot of that time was just getting all the materials together.
Oh, yes.
Doing the background research and
Yeah.
that you need.
I mean, I have file folders like an inch thick on each one of them.
You're very
separate
thorough on
photos.
your research.
What was the most difficult painting for you of the ones that you completed? Did you find one much more harder to?
Yeah, actually, the one post-World War II inventors, we had all the machinery for the sound on the far right. Dolby Archives helped me get all that information, and but it was all data sheets from the time, you know, on all the sound equipment. So it was all straight on shots. I'd have to put them all into perspective. And then we have the Klystron, which is about 12 feet tall. And so that creates a perspective problem.
Yeah.
If you kept it, you know, what you get is you get the top and the bottom doing this. I kind of cheated it a little bit so that it looks more optically correct.
Artistic license
yeah.
with the creative. Yes.
When I did the biotech portrait, I ended up making a little model of desks and moved them around, and I got these 12-inch mannequins, and I placed them around. And
So that was a real challenge to get that all in, to make it.
Yeah, and we had Cohen's desk from the Smithsonian, his lab setup that we had photographs of. A friend of Harold's was in D.C. and he photographed them for us. And so all that equipment's all the correct stuff.
Well, you've talked before about your classical style that you use to get the layers, and you talked about the Venetian and the Italian and the Flemish style. You give us just a little recap on that, and more importantly, what you did, your technique, how you just kind of did your own thing?
Yeah, I mean, initially I wanted to do it in the same kind of style where
Yeah.
you do a complete drawing, and then you ink the drawing, and then you cover it with a light tone and to seal it, and then you put on tones of browns to get all the tonal detail, and then you render the whole thing in a grisaille, which is you paint it all in grays, so that you've got all the tonal. And then on the top you put glazes to bring the color up, and then add more whites into it.
And that kind of brings it to life.
Yeah, that brings it to life. It's a wonderful technique, and I thought about doing that on this, and I go, there's just no way on a 6-foot by 9-foot paintings that I'm ever going to get them done if I do them that way. So I just went into it. I think I did ink the first one, and then I said, well, that's not going to work, because what I found is as I built it up, I would be changing my mind. You know, I mean, I don't do that. You know, once I've drawn it the first time and I put it on, then I see as I'm painting it that things aren't exactly where they're supposed to be. Well, that black ink line kept wanting to come back up, so I'd have to make sure that I got enough paint on it to knock it back. So I ended up going back to a style I used to use where I'd brush an original kind of loose drawing in and positioned, and so everything was the right size and in the right place. And then as I build tones in, I don't worry about the color. I just put the tones in, and in whatever color I happen to be working with. You know, I'm testing different things, and I kind of block that in, and I tighten as I go up and as I add color.
Well, again, on your website, there's other shows that goes into a little bit more detail and shows illustrations and so forth. So if people are interested in that, they can check that out. So
Yeah,
we have another picture, don't we see? Another painting?
Oh yeah, we have a couple more, I think.
The next painting?
Yeah. Okay, this is the Semiconductor Portrait you saw in the backgrounds. And Gordon Moore, the first one we met, is there holding a copy of the Electronics magazine, which printed Moore's Law, which everybody's famous. He's famous for that, and it's actually held to today for how many transistors would fit on a chip and how quickly they'd be added. This is Shockley on the far left, who invented the transistor at Bell Labs, and he basically started Silicon Valley by moving out here. And bringing in these team of people. Most of them worked for Shockley initially before they split off, started Fairchild, and then split off again to make Intel.
You had to know the heights of everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, and all these things. The
weigh?
semiconductor furnace that's off to the right, the only place I could find reference for that was the front of a 1965 Fairchild annual report. And of course, it wasn't at that angle.
Of course, of course.
The dials I found at very old furnace in Scotts Valley with people that now make it.
Well, you've let everybody kind of know that painting from painting the image from a photograph, there's a lot more to it than just copying a picture.
Yeah.
And
I've done a lot of illustration, and I have to invent stuff for illustration. They tell me what they want, and I pull the pieces together.
So there's a kind of a mental process that goes into. Can you give us an idea of what you kind of? I know it's something you got to wrap around it because you want to pull that painting out. You want it to be as lifelike.
Yeah.
Not like a photograph. You don't want to be. You want it to have more character in it.
And so you build around your main units, then the backgrounds, and we had stand-ins, bodies. We used 2x4s to indicate heights of desks and stuff. And we shot all the group in like the basement of one of Harold's buildings.
So I just want people to understand it's just not like illustrating. You're doing something
They're very demanding
that can add character to your subject. And a lot of people say, "Oh, well, you just take a photograph." Well, there's a big difference between taking a photograph and then
The
painting.
thought process. Yeah, there's a
something
lot,
that people
to try to get the
feel.
feeling of the person, and even though you don't know the person, perhaps, but
Well, I met most of these people at their own age, and I photographed them as they look now.
So you can bring that feeling back and put it into
and so
the
I did get a
painting.
chance to observe how they are and how they present themselves. So I do get a certain feeling for it.
And we've got another one to see. I think one more.
Yeah, I think. Oh, there's the computer
Couple more.
inventors. There's Wozniak on the far right, and Doug Engelbart, which we lost a couple years ago, is on the left front. He invented the mouse as well as the
We want
referential
people
database.
to know when they go see these paintings, they can see the personality of the people that are in the painting, and that's what's really important. That's what you've been able to bring to the process, and we were so excited when we heard about what was going on, and that's great. That's important.
We still have another one.
I think we have two more.
Two more? Let's see them.
This is the
Let's see them.
biotechnology. This is one. Cohen let me get into his Stanford lab, because I had no idea what a biotech lab looked like, and he told us about his workbench in the Smithsonian, which we had photographed, and I used that as a style development for the benches and the cases. And there's
Oh, here we
And
go.
that one?
yeah, these are medical devices, and let's see.
We're out of time.
All right.
We're just about
Yeah.
out of time, but anyway, they're very important people. I want to thank you so much for being here. And
Darlene, for asking
you
me.
can check the website to find out more about the prints and more information on his website. And also, please come back again and watch the next segment, because Terry will be back and he's going to be talking and sharing about the sculpture that he created of the inventor Nikola Tesla. And so please watch that. And thank you for watching the show. Watch again. Okay.